All right, good morning, Upward Bound seniors. I've created uh, this presentation to help you break down your award letter. It's a financial award letter guide for Upward Bound seniors. So when we were supposed to meet back in April, we would have went over this at the spring workshop, and I had carved out a time to meet with all the seniors individually, so you didn't have to go through the breakouts. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. So I wanted to kind of record this presentation for you all, so that way you can help. Uh, that way I can help you figure out what it is that you owe. So um, some of the stuff that this will address is, you know, what am I looking at when I see my award letter? Do I owe anything? Am I getting any money back that I can use for living expenses? Do I have to take out an additional loan to cover my costs? What am what does this mean on the award letter? Those types of things. So we'll address that in the presentation as we go on. So, all right. So your award letters, you should have this by now from your school's financial aid office. If you haven't received an award letter from the schools that you've been accepted to, contact me immediately so we can help figure out what's missing from your aid application. Or if you want to take the initiative and contact the financial aid offices directly, you can do so. But you can also kind of figure that out by going on to your school's online portal. So like for instance, it's called Access Point at UWSP. So if you were accepted at Point, you would have access to Access Point. You can sign in and view all of your stuff, including financial aid awards. And also there's usually is a checklist of things that you need to turn in if you are missing something. Now, some schools are going to send you paper award letters as freshmen, usually your first year. Sometimes they'll mail those out, but then they'll also be available to download or just view digitally on your school's online portal. So it's important for you to go in and figure out what that is and make sure that you have it. So again, if you've been accepted to a school, you should have your award letters by now. And if you don't, that means there's some issue with either your acceptance or that you haven't turned in everything that you need for your financial aid. So we'll break down this later in the presentation, but this is a copy of an award letter that a Upward Bound student gave to me from a prior year. So they attended UW-Madison, and we'll break this down later, but basically this is what one may look like. Specifically, if you go to Madison, it'll be there. You know, sometimes they may just be digitally on the screen, and it's not nicely put together like this. But uh, anyways, so it always starts off with your cost of attendance, and that can be deceiving because it almost seems like this is like what it's going to cost me to go here, and it's not. It's kind of a accumulation of all different types of expenses. So that's what we have here, and then they'll follow up with your financial aid offer with all the different types of financial aid that you're eligible for, and they'll total that up. So with cost of attendance, we'll look at things like direct costs, indirect costs, and then in your financial aid offer, what types of aid that you're being offered. Are you getting grants, loans, scholarships, and work study? So we'll touch on that later. So this is kind of a standard definition, and I'll try to break it down after reading through this, but Uh, cost of attendance is basically to help students cover for living expenses, even beyond your tuition and fees, that the government allows financial aid dollars to be used to cover students' entire academic year budget. So basically, the financial aid office has come up with this budget for students, and it's officially known as the cost of attendance, or the COA. So the cost of attendance is an approximation of all total expenses calculated by a college's financial aid office. So this will vary from college to college. And the financial aid office needs to include things like your books, housing, tuition fees, um, and let's see, it says as such, it's the maximum limit for the total grants and loans a student can receive. So this cost of attendance is the maximum aid that anyone can take. So let's say if you get grants and you want to take out a crap ton of loans, like that's the cost of attendance is the maximum aid you can get. Um, it says, in a way, estimates that don't match the reality of expenses for students could mean that they are left with insufficient resources to cover their basic needs. On the flip side, some schools might overestimate living costs, which could lead to some students and families borrowing more than is necessary. And we'll explain that in the future here. So basically, the cost of attendance is like I said before, it's your budget. It's like uh, how much you can maybe expect to incur. Now, it doesn't mean that you will, and this is not what you're being charged for. So the cost of attendance includes direct costs. So it does include things that you are directly billed for. So those are things like your tuition, your fees, housing if you live on campus. Do you have a meal plan? And then sometimes books. Sometimes schools will charge you directly for books, but that's not common, and I'll talk about books later. And then indirect costs. So these are other costs associated with going to college, but you're not billed for. So like, let's say the the university requires you to go buy your books on your own. They may have a bookstore, or you can go somewhere else. Supplies. Maybe you know you're going to incur costs of buying like pens, notebooks, maybe a backpack, just general supplies that you need for school. Transportation. Obviously the school is not going to bill you for your gas, but you may bring your car to college, and you're going to have to pay for parking fees or your gas to get to and from home, or if you want to drive around to town, or maybe you don't have a car and your transportation may be like public transit, like taking buses or tickets or Ubers or taxis. Loan fees. If you do take out student loans, there are some loan fees, and they cover that in your budget. And then miscellaneous personal expenses, those are going to be like maybe just like general spending. Oops, we'll go back. Those will be things like your general spending money. uh, Personal expenses could be like toiletries, like toothpaste, toothbrush, shampoo, just things that you're going to have to pay for that you're not living with your parents now, like you're going to incur all these expenses. So the cost of attendance looks at things that you're not actually being billed for, but they also want you to be able to get financial aid to help cover those costs if you want or are able to. So this is an example zoomed in on the award letter from Madison, and you can see that they have tuition and fees, so they've lumped those together, and that's $10,895. So that's usually things like tuition and fees, like that's really what it's going to cost you. Now, housing and meals, they've estimated at 11,558. Now, remember, so this is an estimate for all students. Now, they don't know specifically what meal plan you picked and where you're living. Okay. Now, this may be a standard, like the standard middle of the road meal plan and the regular dorms. This may, your costs of housing and meals may be higher if you chose like a really high meal plan with lots of meals, or maybe you're not living. Sorry, my microphone went out. So maybe you're not living in the regular freshman dorm, and you've chosen like a luxury apartment on campus or something like that. So you need to be, if you really want to see what your cost of housing and meals are, you need to actually look at like what meal plan did I select, and where am I living. So books and supplies, they've combined those together. Um, Transportation, so obviously they don't know what you're going to spend on transportation, but they come up with an average uh, based on what typical students may spend in a year going to school. And then also personal, they've budgeted 2,356. So you can see at the bottom, they put housing and meals as indirect costs. Uh, that's kind of true for those that are, so your direct costs are obviously always going to be your tuition and fees, okay? But the indirect housing and meals, I would argue, are part of the direct if you're living on campus, but also maybe you guys are living at home, okay? And you're not paying money to live in the dorms. Well, they still can give you then indirect costs for, like, maybe you're living at home and your parents are, it costs money to have you live there, and also you're eating there and whatnot. So they've estimated that the cost of attendance to attend Madison is $26,783. Now, again, this is not what you're going to owe or what you're billed for. These are just estimated direct and indirect expenses. Even the direct costs are estimated for the average meal plan and housing plan. In Like I said, you may pick a higher meal plan or a more expensive housing unit. So books. So books can go a couple ways. They're either included with your tuition and they just have a free rental system. So like you don't have to worry about thinking of this as an extra cost. Or otherwise, you, like when I went to college, I was required to purchase or rent them separately from the bookstore. Or technically, I didn't even have to go to the school's bookstore. Sometimes they would buy them on Amazon or wherever. But the book charges generally do not get billed to you, and therefore you don't include the book charges when figuring out how much you owe them to school. Because one, they're included in tuition, it's a free rental system, or get charged in your general fees, or two, you're going out and buying them yourself, and therefore if you're buying them from somewhere else, like you don't get billed directly, you're buying them ahead of time. So in some rare circumstances, some schools will allow you to charge them to your financial aid, which then may cause you, so then you would include that in figuring out how much you owe the school. So let me take a step back. So some schools will be like, okay, like maybe at their bookstore, you have to purchase their books, okay? And then you don't have enough money, and then you speak to someone in financial aid, and they allow you to charge your books to your student account. So uh, then they would get billed directly to the school. So it's up to you to figure out how the book system works at your school, and I would look into that if you haven't already. Okay, so just a summary of the cost of attendance. So remember, the cost of attendance does not equal what you'll build for or what you owe. It's an estimate of what college might cost, factoring in living expenses. The main things there's only three things you'll be billed for, or four if you want to separate fees out, but you'll be billed for tuition and fees, housing if you live on campus, and your meals if you live on campus, and that's it. If you are a commuter, you're only going to get billed for tuition and fees. And again, in some instances, if you charged your books to your student account, then those charges may show up later. So just a brief overview of the different types of financial aid. On your award letters, you may see different types of grants. The standard is the federal Pell Grant, so that's the grant from the federal government. Those are for lower income families. Then there's also the Wisconsin grant, which is a grant from the state of Wisconsin. And then if you go to a private school, they'll also offer you like donor funded private grants. So like I went to Lakeland University, which is a private school, and I got the Lakeland University grant on top of that. So these are based on financial need. You may not have qualified for any grants, but remember, grants are money you usually don't have to pay back, but sometimes the grants do need to be paid back if you drop out early in the semester, so be aware of that. Then there's also scholarships. There's of course like school sponsored ones, so like if maybe you got into Point and they have the Pointer Pride scholarship, you get that. Or there's also the outside scholarships. Maybe you earned a scholarship from somewhere in the local community. So make sure you're communicating with the financial aid office to get that money to your school. Loans. So there's different types of student loans. Most of you will be offered subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Or maybe only unsubsidized loans. The difference is that the interest rate kicks in on the unsubsidized loan while you're in school, where the interest is deferred on the subsidized loan. Some schools offer the Parent Plus loan, and some require you to do the application before you can get that. And basically, it's a loan that your parents can take out the through the FAFSA application. It requires a separate application, but your parents, by applying for the FAFSA, your parents are eligible to apply for that. Uh, One thing to keep in mind with loans is that they have loan fees. So when you take out a student loan or you accept a student loan, even like the subsidized and unsubsidized, what you take out doesn't reflect that actually applies to your account. So subsidized and unsubsidized loans have a little over 1% loan fees, and then the plus loans have about a 4% loan fee. So, for example, if you accepted a subsidized loan for $1,750 for the fall semester, you would actually get 1,682, which applies towards like your balance of what you owe. Okay, that's because they took out the 1%, the 1.059% fee. And then last but not least is the federal work study. So some of you may have been offered this. If you receive work study, you're able to find a job at your college through student employment. This does not guarantee you will get a job. However, it does mean you are able to find one and participate in the work study program if you choose. So this money is paid to you directly. And to be used as spending money, and therefore does not get included well, it says on the worksheet, but it doesn't get included on the college calculator or when you're factoring in how much you owe. Okay. Uh, Now, you don't have to have work study to get a job on campus, but the work study is basically the employers on campus can use the work study to pay you so they don't have to pay out of their own funds. So you're more attractive to hire if you have work study funds than someone that doesn't, because otherwise the department would have to pay you, 100% out of their department. Otherwise, the work study usually covers most of your hourly pay. So I always suggest that families accept the work study, and if you don't get a job, it doesn't affect anything. But then if you do want to get a work study job, then you have the money there to do so. All right, so this is kind of an example again of the Madison one. As you can see, um, they have the Pell Grant. There's also the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, Wisconsin Grant. There's Bucky Badger Grant. So in this instance, this person wasn't even awarded any loans. Like they just gave them all the free grant money, and that totals $23,000. Now it looks like, oh wow, I'm short $3,500. Because my cost of attendance is 26,000. But remember, like you're not actually billed for transportation or these miscellaneous personal costs. I don't know why my mic keeps going out. So really, like your tuition is about 10,000. If we want to estimate your housing and meals at 11, so that's about 22,000. So actually, it looks like you do have enough here, and we'll get to calculating it in a second. This is just another sample one of what one might look like. It's got tuition and fees. I think this is an example of one I made from UW Green Bay. where the estimated tuition and fees is a lot less at the school. Loan fees, room and board. That's room and board is your housing and meal plan. Or again, like if you're living off campus, just your estimated cost of if you're living off campus or with your parents. Um, in this example, they're offered work study and the loans. And again, like the work study isn't money. Like it's tricky because it looks like, oh, I'm getting $15,000 in aid, but remember this work study, if you accept it, you're not going to get paid that towards your cost, right? That's just money that you can earn for yourself. So you want to make sure you take out the work study when you're adding up all of your awards. And then this is another example. I think this one's UWSP. Um, and well, back here, like this person, like you might not get a lot of Pell Grants. So like this one's at 4,200. This person got 6,195, which was the maximum for that year. And then there's the Wisconsin grant, work study, and the loans. Typically, as freshmen, you'll get a total of five. Usually, it's 3,500 in subsidized loans and 2,000 in unsubsidized loans, or it may just be 5,500 in unsubsidized loans. It varies. So how do I figure out what do I owe? So calculating what you owe, or maybe like what you'll be refunded, because there's three options. You're either gonna not have enough financial aid at this point to cover, and so you owe a balance. Or in a rare circumstance, you would have exactly the amount of financial aid needed to cover the exact amount of your costs, and so it's a zero. That would be rare because the odds of that happening, um, because costs vary and aid varies. Or maybe you may be refunded or you may be due for a refund. So this is where your financial aid package is actually larger than what like you're actually being billed for. And then so the school cuts you a check for the excess aid, and then like that excess aid can be used for living expenses, like those indirect costs that I talked about, like your personal or transportation and stuff like that. It's meant to give you some spending money to cover those indirect costs that you are going to probably incur by being a student. So you can do this by hand, and it's very simple. Basically, you're going to add up all of your costs by the semester, or if you want to do it by the year, you're going to subtract your total financial aid, then for and be consistent by the semester or the year. So you add up all your costs, subtract out your financial aid, and then you add your loan fees if you did take out loans. So a positive number indicates what you owe after financial aid. A negative number indicates excess funds. You will receive a check from your school to use for living expenses. This would mean your financial aid is larger than what you owe. And so if you have more financial aid than what you owe and you're going to get a refund for living expenses and you are taking out loans, maybe you could reduce your loans to save yourself from paying back later on. So uh, one thing, so remember when we look at your cost, you were looking at tuition and fees, your meal plan, and your housing. Okay, those are the only general things you'll be directly billed for. Then you'll subtract your financial aid, and remember not to include work study. So you can do this by hand, but also I created the college cost calculator, which we went over in College Readiness 12. So we'll do a quick review of that too, because that's kind of a really easy tool, and hopefully it'll help you visualize what I just all went through. So uh, I'm gonna reshare. Okay, so if you want to go to our website, if you just Google UWSP Upward Bound. And this may look a little different if you're on your phone. The the menu will be right up here. But anyways, if you go over to the college resources menu and the college cost calculator, The college cost calculator is right here, and then it'll download, and it's an Excel form. Now I already have one started. So this is like a basic worksheet then that you can use to fill out your award letters. So this section here has all the free money. This section has all the loans, which also calculates the loan fees for you, which I'll show in a minute, and then also your direct charges. And then this little hub over here then will either figure out if you owe any money, or if you have any money coming back, or if you just have enough aid to cover exactly what's needed. So in this example, I just posted this down here so that we can easily see what the costs will be. So in this example, the person gets $3,098 in Pell Grant each semester, and then $3,097 in the spring, so $1 less. So $30.98. So like we go to the Pell Grant and type that in, $30.98. And then we do $30.97. Okay, great. Then they also have the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant for $500 a semester. So that's what this FSEOG stands for. So that's 500 and 500. Then they have the Wisconsin grant. It's 1502 and 1501. And then they have the Bucky Badger grant. That's for 500 a semester. So that's a grant that's from their institution. So we'll use this other grant tab and type in Bucky grant and put in 500, 500. And then they have the UW-Madison grant, 6042. And I'm just going to type this in this other grant too, UW-Madison resident grant. What was the amount again? It was 6042.50. Okay, so then it totals up all my free money for the fall and spring. Now in this award, you didn't have any loans. If you wanted loans, you could maybe ask their financial aid office, but usually if you have tons of free money, like they won't offer it to you if you have enough to cover your costs. So we'll leave the loans at 0. Now it comes down to tuition and housing and meals. So uh, it's safe to use the tuition off the cost of attendance. So that's $57.79. Okay. Um, and I don't know like what meal plans you all are taking, but I'm just going to use, they combined it, housing and meals here together. Oh, sorry, I actually I put that in the wrong spot. So I'm just going to leave it combined, 5779, 5779. And the tuition and fees, so it's 5617. All right, it keeps going off. I'm not sure why. So 5617 and 5277. All right, great. So, if you knew exactly what housing residence hall you picked, you could put it in put it in here. And then like if you knew what meal plan it was, like option 2, I don't know, every school is different. I could split it out. But for the sake of just doing this, I'm just using what's on the cost of attendance. Now remember, like personal and transportation and books and supplies, like those aren't going to be charged to me by the school. Like all of this stuff are things that are going to occur later on or whatever. So what I'm directly billed for is tuition, housing, and meals. So that comes up to 11. Well, it's different each semester because for some reason the tuition was a little bit higher, the fees were higher in the fall. So if you notice here, this when your aid is larger, when your total aid is larger than what you owe, this will automatically change to amount refunded to student. And notice that it's a negative amount. Okay, you can't owe a negative balance, so when it goes negative, that actually means there's a credit on your account, which ends up getting refunded to you. So like in this instance, the student would get a check for $246.50 for the fall and $584.50 for the spring. So the total then for the year is about 831. Okay. Um, so I'm going to move on to another example here. This is, I think, the UW Green Bay one. So let's look at the financial aid offer first. Okay, so in this instance, they get 500 in the SOAG grant and 2,100 in the Pell Grant. Okay, so 2,100, 2,100. SOEG is 500, 500. The Wisconsin grant is 750 a semester. Work study. Remember, that's a trick. You don't put the work study funds in there because if you accept it, that gets paid to you if you end up working. Then we have 1750 each semester for subsidized loans and 1,000 unsubsidized loans. So that's it for the grants. Remember, we're not putting in work study. So 1750, 1750, 1,000, 1,000. All right, and then notice here at the bottom, it automatically calculates those loan fees I talked about before and subtracts it for you. So it's taking out the loan fees of $29.12. So even though you're taking out the loan for the fall of 1750, you won't end up getting that full amount because of the loan fees. So now we have to fill in what am I being billed for? So I'm going to use the estimate on here for the tuition and fees. So that's 39.39.16. And remember, like the tuition for next year, usually they don't even post it. They don't figure it out until July officially. But it's okay to use your estimate here. Again, the housing. Now, if you knew specifically, like they book room and board together again in the estimate. So like if I were you, if you knew about where you're going to live, I would look up the cost of that and enter it, and then also I'd look at the meal plans and enter in the cost of the meal plan you picked. But for the sake of this example, I'm just going to combine them again and put in what's estimated on the cost of attendance. So that was 2010. But if you did know your housing plan, you could type in like where you're living, what res hall, and then also the meal plan that and put it in here. I also have some spots if you have some sort of additional fees that you can include here. Some schools may have some weird fees that they tell you, and so you can put them on there to add. Or if you have anything else that you know that you're gonna incur that the school bills you, you have an option to write those in. So um, so now in this instance, your total charges for the fall are less than, again, like your total amount of aid. So in this instance, the student has enough to cover again, and they're actually being refunded only, it's a lot less than the last one, but it's $120 a person each semester, for a total of $243 for the year. So now remember, like, you're taking out loans. So like in this situation, maybe you don't need this 120. So maybe you could go back and tell your financial aid office, I don't need 1,000 in this unsubsidized loans. I could reduce this by like 120. So maybe I'll only accept 880 and 880 a semester. Now it's hard to get exactly down to what you need because of these loan fees calculating. But then you'd have a refund of like $3. But maybe like you say, hey, I saved up money over the summer. I don't even need the unsubsidized loan. I'm just going to take the subsidized. If you can do that, and you can zero these out and not accept them, then you would owe $867 a semester. Or maybe you're like, oh, well, let's take out 500 of this 1,000 for each semester. Then okay, so maybe 372 is something I can manage. Now you're not going to get any refund, because now in this instance you're electing to owe, but remember, your refund was coming from taking out the full amount of your loans, right? All right, and then this final example is for those that maybe aren't getting grants or a lot of grants, and actually this next example is for somebody that does get a lot of grants. So we'll do this. So this was one for UWSP. So tuition, let's see, no, let's look at the aid. Supplemental grant is 500, and this is 3098, 3097. $500, $500. The Wisconsin grant is $1,575. Federal work study. Now remember, again, we don't put that in there, and then we have the subsidized loans for $1,750 and $1,000 each semester. All right. Then again, I'm just going to combine the tuition and fees. So 4145. Then I have my housing, and I'm just gonna combine the room and board. If you see the pattern, most schools will combine your room and board, or your housing and meal plan, into the estimate of the cost of attendance. 2250. Again, you're probably going to want to look up what the housing is for where you're living, and then also your meal plan. Okay, so again, build for housing, and then tuition, housing, and meals. So in this instance, the students refunded $1,498. Okay, so now you could use that money for living expenses. Maybe, like I said, maybe you don't want these unsubsidized loans then, because you have plenty enough. okay, then your refund is only 500, and maybe you're like, hey, that'll be good enough to get me by. Again, maybe you want to reduce this even more and only take out 1,000 each semester. And then now it changes to what you owe is 232. Okay. So remember, a negative number is what you're being refunded. A positive number is what you owe. A zero is just your aid equals your aid equals what you owe. So maybe you're a family that didn't get any grants. Okay. So let's say this is an example of like what tuition and living on campus at UWSP would be like if you didn't get any grants and they only offered you loans, because maybe maybe you're middle income, or maybe your family's middle or high income. So in this instance, 0 grant dollars, you only get the loans. This is the cost of living on campus, with tuition, meal plan, housing. So now this family owes 3,674 a semester, and that's 7,348 for the year. And on this asterisk here, it said, if you cannot afford this, consider applying for financial aid. Contact your financial aid office to see what other options you have. One of so you're going to want to have a conversation with your family and how you want to proceed. I know most probably middle class families can't afford that. And I was kind of in this situation when I was in school. I got some grants, but it didn't cover everything. And so my family had to figure out how we were going to tackle like the remaining balance. You can look at the Parent Plus loan then. That's one of the options. I would recommend parents applying for that. If they get denied, you get extra unsubsidized loans. But that's something you all need to figure out. Once you do figure it out, and maybe you are taking out the plus loan, maybe you say, like, maybe your parents will be like, okay, I'll take out 4,000 a semester on this plus loan. Okay, so I put 4,000 in each semester here. This takes out the loan fees for the plus loan already, and so like this student would get like $156 back a semester then, and maybe they could use that for living expenses, or maybe you could cut the plus loan back some. Or maybe your parents like, I want to make sure that you have a lot of money, because maybe you're going off to Madison and I want to make sure you have a lot of money, so let's do 6,000 a semester on this plus loan. Okay, then you would be refunded $2,000 a semester. And so it's up to you guys on what you want to do. So anyways, hopefully this was helpful and not too confusing. I know it's probably easier if we were in person and we could stop and ask questions. So if you want to do a one-on-one session, let me know. If you watch the video, if you could like let me know, message me, send us a text, email me, message me on Facebook, or just drop a comment on the YouTube video below. That way I know that you watched it. So thank you guys.